everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Read Right to Left podcast. I am G from Simply G, joined by my always wonderful co-host, Ray from Whimsical Pictures.
Hi, everyone.
And this month, August, we are talking about music manga, i.e. series that focus on music, musicians, bands, whatever else that may entail, and some of the various series that we've read, that we may have also watched, answer some of your questions, and hopefully it should just be a pretty fun time, nothing too strenuous. So yeah, we hope you guys enjoy. First and foremost, I think it's fairly self-explanatory as to what music manga is. It is manga focused on music and musicians, and sometimes performance. Sometimes the music aspect is used as a way to enable or facilitate another sort of genre. There's a lot of comedic music manga. There's a lot of dramatic music manga. Sometimes the music isn't the main focus, but oftentimes is there to highlight or emphasize certain aspects of characters' growth, things like that. And I would say that there is actually quite a few music series that have gotten quite popular in the English-speaking and Japanese side over the last several years, but also historically, across a whole different range of genres as well. And we are seeing more and more of these titles being licensed and released in English as well.
We're also seeing, I think, a wider variety of different types of music represented in the manga that we're getting in English, as well as the sort of proliferation of digital-only releases of some of the more niche music manga.
Yeah, so I think rather than kind of going into what music manga is...
What is music?
What does music
Truly.
mean? I think we can just go into some of the more popular titles, some of which have had adaptations, anime adaptations, or live-action adaptations as well. Some that haven't, and some that people may have heard of, some that maybe they haven't. So one of the first titles that I think of, and one that I would argue is still very popular to this day, namely thanks to a great anime adaptation, one that a lot of people are familiar with and is still in print from Funimation, is Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad. And this is a 34-volume series released in its entirety in English. Originally it was being released in print by Tokyopop, which I think got 12 or 14 volumes out in print before, the late 2000s. And only recently Kodansha has released the other 20-odd volumes to complete the series, so you can actually read all of it in its entirety, thanks to Comixology or wherever you read your digital releases. And that is how I read and completed the series personally. That series is a pretty popular one, I think, namely because it does appeal to a lot of people's interests. It's about a teenage boy who kind of falls in love with guitar and rock and roll after meeting kind of this strange guy with an even stranger dog, and they start a band and find some popularity, and then their impact and their lives throughout that experience, growing popularity in Japan and worldwide, and their relationship to kind of the rock industry as a whole. There's a couple mysteries, a couple tense things going on throughout the course of the series, but ultimately it's about the love and passion for music that some of these individuals have, and what music means to them, not only as an art form, but as their personal expression, as their means of escaping situations as well. It's done very, very well, and it is one that I would recommend to people. And as I said, the anime is still very popular. It does manage to capture a lot of the really great things of Beck, especially the first half-ish of the series.
Yeah, so this is also definitely one of the earlier, like, music manga that I've read as well, and I think, yeah, I started with the anime. So, and then just read it from my library. I think, you know, when I was a younger fan, I, you know, watched things like K-On! Or I watched things like, L'Accordo d'Oro. And, Beck was really the first one I think I saw that was, like, really, like, a music nerd manga. Like, it felt that way.
Yeah.
It is so in love with the music that it's talking about, with guitar, with the process of learning guitar, with what it's like to be in a band, to play these, like, you know, grimy music bars, grimy live houses. The types of characters that are portrayed are also very much like band nerds, rock nerds types. The kinds of people you would find at, like, a live house. And just the general vibe of it is very, like, I want to say indie. Just the way it tells its story has kind of a hipster quality to it, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, which the anime picks up on because it's directed by is his name Osamu Kobayashi, the director of Paradise Kiss, which he also brings kind of that indie hipster vibe to Paradise Kiss as well. So, but I feel like him and Beck are a match made in heaven, to be honest.
Add to that, Harold Sakuichi, who is the mangaka, you can really tell that this is almost, I wouldn't be surprised if this is an extension of his own interests. You can see that he does know a lot about sort of the era of rock and roll that these kids are interested in, the music scene in the US in particular, but also the UK, how rock music has evolved over the decades and how that's influencing current artists or current to then artists, which was the late 90s, early 2000s. And for these characters, as Ray mentioned, these are definitely like rock nerds or music nerds. They're the type of kids that start a band not because they want to be rich and famous and popular, but because they want to be like the greatest guitarist of all time. Yeah.
The greatest bass guitarist of all time.
Exactly. Yeah, these are kids who are doing it for the love of creating music rather than like, oh, I want to be, not that Instagram existed, but like, I want to be a celebrity. And that comes up a little more prominently in the later half of the manga as well. So if you are someone who's only read the Tokyo Pop print release of the series, I would encourage you to continue the series thanks to Kodansha, because there's a lot more story. There's a lot more, and it's just really fun and exciting to see the directions that the story does go along. And how difficult being an artist and being a musician can be. Obviously, it's not, you don't automatically become a superstar super easily. There's a lot of hard work and disagreements, especially when you're in a band. There's a lot of conflict that can come out of that, and I think that's all pretty accurately portrayed as well.
Yeah, It's good. It's good. I think, like, on the subject of, like, this being a series about rock nerds who formed a band because of, like, their love for the music and, like, you know, guitar or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It made me think of a title I've talked about before that I don't think you've read. I think you've been watching the anime recently. But one that is much more interested in, like, the showbiz and fame side of forming a rock band, which is the Josei manga, Nana. It's kind of on the cusp between shoujo and josei, like that magazine that it ran in. Yeah, Nana, by Ayazawa. Ayazawa is first and foremost a fashion nerd. She was in fashion design school before she decided to pivot to manga. Her series Paradise Kiss is about the fashion industry and also ran in a fashion magazine, not a manga magazine. And I think that comes out in her interests in Nana as well. She's very interested in dressing up her little rock idol dolls. But this series is, I would say, it does get into some of the music. I felt like I had a pretty firm idea of how I thought that the two main bands in the series might sound, which I thought was reflected pretty well by the anime's choices. But it is, when it's showing a concert scene, it's like more like a still image of like rockers looking cool on the stage, more so than like Beck, where it's, you know, it's the movement and the sweat and, you know, the vibe of being in that club, hearing that music. And Nana is much more, it starts off being about like two girls named Nana who end up through kismet rooming together at the same apartment. And one of them is like this girly girl who moved to Tokyo to be with her boyfriend, which works out great, I assure you. And the other one is this more like butch, like cool rocker girl who's in a band, and she moved to Tokyo to perform with her band. But the story sort of quickly moves to be more about the rocker Nana's life than Hachi, the other one's life. As Hachi becomes more involved in like the band stuff, gets to meet the other band members, and meets their rival band, who she's actually a big fan of. And things get messier and messier from there. But it is, a lot of the story of Nana is very wrapped up in show business and paparazzi. The big instigator,
the commercialized.
The commercialized end of it. Propping up Nana as well as the rival band, their lead singer Reira, as, you know, these idols, creating their personas, their media image, and how that can be destroyed by, like, the simplest of actions or misunderstandings. There's a big paparazzi scandal that happens early-ish in the series that ends up being sort of the instigator of most of the conflict and fallout from that, with a lot of the characters ending up having to be, like, put in essentially protection by the company.
Yep.
And it's just this intense fallout from this horrible media circus. Which I would say is very, like, it is, because this series is about rock musicians, that it deals with this stuff. Like, so I would very much call it a music manga. In that it is about the music industry, and idol culture. But it is very different in its focus than something like Beck or like Blue Giant, that's very much for the love of the music, man. But yeah, it's a similar era, I think. Started in the 90s. I think. Oh gosh, don't quote me. I just think it's kind of an interesting comparison since they're both about up-and-coming rock bands.
No, I think it's a good comparison to make, and especially because although Beck does touch on, the media and paparazzi aspect of the story at certain points, it's not to the forefront of the story, and obviously that mental strain or that impact that can have on singers, musicians, musical artists of any sort, in the same way that it does Nana, and then how that influences the larger story and the larger relationships of the band and the people around them, and relationships with each other as well. So I do think it's quite apt to include it on this list, and is definitely has a lot to say about the kind of wider musical industry and recording studios and things like that.
Speaking of messy rock band manga, should we talk about one that I'm sure everyone probably thought of immediately when they saw the title of this podcast episode? Given.
Yes.
Just following the thematic thread along. Where we are in the series right now, the kids are still, like, super up and coming, so there hasn't been that much, like, super detailed industry stuff. There is, it's a lot of stuff about, like, how to get into, like, these contests. I like the focus on creating a social media presence, because obviously that wouldn't have been as much of a thing when, like, Nana and Beck were created.
Yeah.
So,
but it's kind of crucial nowadays for musicians.
That's, like, their first step. They were like, we've got to make a Twitter account and make Twitter accounts for all of y'all. And, don't let them know that you're gay. Which
somewhat defeats the purpose. But, so, for the few viewer or listeners who may not know what Given is, it is a currently ongoing BL title. It has a recent anime television show as well as sequel film, adapting, I think, all 6 of the volumes that have been released thus far. So we're pretty caught up adaptation-wise. It's not a super fast release for the series, which is pretty typical for BL just generally, but it follows a band of 4 individuals, 2 university students, 2 high school students. Main characters are the high school students and their relationship, one who decides to teach the other guitar after he asks, basically, and their friendship and romantic relationship evolving from there. Our kind of newbie to music, his exploration and realization of becoming a musician. He really hadn't had an interest in singing or guitar or anything prior to this.
Well, the guitar he has belonged to his
former boyfriend,
his ex-boyfriend. I don't think that's really a spoiler. And he carries it with him. He's sort of an odd person, I guess. He's very I would say very coded. I know there's a lot of, like, people who've seen themselves in him who are, like, on the spectrum and stuff. But he really struggles to understand social cues and respond, quote-unquote, appropriately. So, one of his quirks, I guess, is that he just carries this guitar around with him everywhere, which is sort of his way of physically holding on to the trauma that he's experienced relating to this past relationship. And, but he doesn't know how to play that guitar. He just, like, has it. So, when he finds out that, Uenayama, the other boy, Ritsuka, can play guitar, he's like, can you teach me? You know, so that he can get closer to the person that he's lost. And there is a huge focus, I think, on overcoming the trauma from past relationships and figuring out how to move on healthily is a big thematic focus of the series.
All of our characters, not just our high school.
Everyone.
Characters. For everyone. Because our university students are just as messy, if not more so.
They're so much more messy than our good, wonderful high school boys. And their pure love.
Yeah. But just generally, music, for as much as Given is about the band as a unit, and also about using music as a way to work past trauma, to work through grief, to work through again that self-expression, and coming to terms with things in your past and things in your current.
Well, it becomes like it's so sweet that it's like for Mafuyu, who, you know, struggles to relate to people in conversation, you know, a lot of, like, his journey with music is realizing that, like, he can get across the things that he's feeling and get other people to feel them, too, through his music. Which, I don't know, that is really nice to me.
It's really sweet and lovely. And I think it's also very true to life. It's why people express themselves through music or through poetry or through painting. Like, the arts are a form of self-expression, in sort of the most purest form for a lot of people. So I do think it portrays that element of creation and I guess self-exposure very, very well, for not only for Mafuyu, who ultimately kind of later on in the series becomes the band's writer. He writes all of the lyrics for their songs, but also how all of these boys kind of work through their own personal issues through playing their music, through interacting with music, not only in the band but sort of generally. Again, these college students have a lot of issues.
I kind of like how, particularly with the college students, like, obviously we see Mafuyu refusing to sort of move on from what's happened in a very literal sense. You know, he's still in a grieving period for losing someone, and he has this very physical reminder that he carries around with him. And then, you know, he has a very straightforward arc where it's like he writes this song to help him get over his grief, and then he sings it. And, I mean, he's not over it, but it's like, you know, it helps him start to move on, and he starts a new relationship. It's all very, at least up to that point, it's all very clean. Whereas our older boys, I kind of like this exploration of, like, staying in a toxic, ugly relationship that's making nobody happy, because you just don't know how to live apart from that relationship. anymore.
The
like,
familiar, is comfortable, and
it's
and
comfortable even though you're miserable.
Exactly, and it's that misery that you both of them have experienced for so long, that with each other and from each other, that all of that is tied up in very genuine feelings of love and care, but there is that hesitancy to completely reject it, even though, again, it's a very toxic, terrible, abusive relationship. But I mean, like with most toxic, abusive relationships, it's hard to leave because it's what you've known for so long. It's what you're familiar with. It's what you see as normal, even when everyone around you recognizes that it's not healthy and not something you should stay in. And even if you logically know that it's not something, good for you, you should leave. It is the mental challenge of overcoming that. And then also the mental, if we're coming back to music, how that ties into specifically what that means for your own music, or well, for this character, how music ties into that toxicity and kind of his process of separating being a musician and how he enjoys music from that really terrible relationship that he's been battling with for the last, 10-ish years.
Well, there's this very, clear metaphor for, the emotional stagnancy of the relationship through how, Akihiko's the name of the band member character in this. How, at first, he gets into this relationship because he's so moved by the beauty of his boyfriend's performance on the violin, and then gradually realizes that he absolutely hates playing the violin. And then once he sort of finally frees himself from his situation a little bit, he finds that he's interested in learning the violin again. So I feel like it's it's not a subtle metaphor. But it is a nice one.
And it just plays on that self-doubt, that inferiority, that also what is it, imposter syndrome that people have anyway, generally. There's always going to be a better, violinist than you. There's always going to be a better artist than you. There's always going to be a better writer than you. And then how some people take that as an encouragement, how some people take that as kind of a means to reject themselves or to give up. And I think, again, that going back to that allegory, very obvious allegory, it ties it in very neatly with the larger themes of that particular storyline and that particular relationship.
I think it also, this series' exploration of talent is quite interesting. And I think it's very interesting. We have the contrast between Mafuyu and Ritsuka being all, doe-eyed and lovey-dovey with each other in, their personal narrations. And then you'll switch to the next set of pages or the next chapter, and it'll be Akihiko describing his love as this very violent, ruinous thing, because of the way that his admiration for this violinist, his at that point roommate who he sleeps with sometimes, yikes.
Yep.
His admiration and his jealousy have just gotten so entangled with his other feelings for this person, his feelings of love, that it's just and I think that's that interplay of, like, they're not really separable, you know, when you're both aiming for the same goal, and you find this person who you admire and you bring them into your life, you know, I feel like the jealousy is almost going to seep in. You're going to the same school, trying to be the best student at the school.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that just isn't going to work well. And I think that interplay of emotions is quite interesting. I also like Ugetsu. Like, he's a fucked up mess, but, like, same. Yeah. So,
well, I like him because I like his character because he's realistically broken or realistically fucked up in a way that, again, you see it in Nana as well. Like, this is an abusive person, but it doesn't inherently make them, like, a terrible, horrible person.
Like a cackling
like,
Disney villain. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they're both of those examples. They're complicated people who may, in 99% of situations, like, make the correct choice, be totally fine, normal, whatever else. But when it comes to the people that they care about, are incredibly controlling or just toxic, hurtful, lash out in ways that they may not even fully understand why they do that. And I think that's a much more understandable human representation of, well, abuse and people who are abusive. But it also makes them... they're not monsters in the fact of, like, they are people that you probably know in your everyday life. They aren't, as you said, like, cackling Disney villains. They exist in real life, and they, to you as a friend, may seem perfect in every way, but that's not necessarily the case to people closer to them, partners, family, whatever else it may be. So I think it's just really good to see, and also sometimes that those people aren't without hope to change and recognize that in themselves, I think is an important thing as well. So it's just, yeah, I think it's done really, really well, and he is an interesting character.
He is. I think he's more redeemable than, like, Takumi.
Yes.
But also, I kind of... There's almost, like... I don't know if I can express this well, but there's almost, like, a matter-of-factness to tragedy within Given that gives it a realism that I really appreciate. So, like, Akihiko eventually, you know, leaves Ugetsu. And... that's when, you know, he starts to realize that, like, there's so many things that he just doesn't know how to do because he was financially dependent on Ugetsu in so many ways. He doesn't know how to live on his own. And, you know, it's just kind of this matter-of-fact realization for him that's just like... And he doesn't go like, wow, that's fucked up. He just goes like, huh, I've been with him a long time, haven't I? And I feel like... do you get it?
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean, and I think... in addition to that, the matter of factness that Mafuyu coming to terms with death and losing someone is also, like, at some point he moves past that grief. He doesn't stop caring about that person, but at the same time, he doesn't want his life to be ruled by that. And the way that it's a very matter-of-fact thing for him to say, like, I love you, I miss you, but I'm not in love with you now because you're not here for me to love you, is, like, a really interesting way that that's portrayed compared to other series where it may be like, you'll always be in my heart, and I'll always love you, and I'll never move on. I think it's just like a much healthier way to approach that.
Yeah. Life just kind of moves on, and you're either going to move with it or you're not, and I feel like that's kind of, you know, more or less the overall theme of a lot of Given, so it makes sense.
And especially for, like, this cast who are all relatively, like, under 25, you gotta, sometimes, you know, things in life change you, but you also have to not, like, when you're 16, you need to know how to keep going forward outside of, like, the bad stuff that's happened to you. I think it's really well done, just generally. There's hope
Given
to be
is
found
really
in every
good.
Situation. It is.
The anime is
Go
really
watch
good
the
too.
show as well.
Yeah, read the manga, watch the show. It's all great.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't mention, but the manga's being released by Sublime, Viz's BL imprint. It's very, very good, and also I think a really great beginner's BL because it's very unlike a lot of what I think people associate with the genre. So don't be afraid to try it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the ones where the characters are characters first and not fetishes first. You know, it's more complicated than Seme and Uke, so there you go. Also, sex does happen, but it's not shown. It's not pornographic, so at least not right now.
Yeah. As of right now, it's not the hyper explicitness of something like, I don't know,
Dick Fight Island.
I'm glad that's what we both thought of immediately.
It's just such a good localized title. It's so good.
Yes, it is. Also, that one's hyper explicit, so it's also a good comparison.
What a great starter BL. I think everyone should start with Dick Fight Island.
It'll certainly prepare you for anything, to be perfectly honest.
No, I don't think it prepares you for Matic.
No, nothing prepares you for Matic.
Anyway.
We're not talking about BL,
those two
we've done
aren't?
that episode before.
They're not music manga.
They're not music manga. We'll continue with our music.
I also read the music Yuri. Actually, there's a couple. So, I feel like almost the more comparable one, even though it's a different genre of music, is After Hours.
Yep.
Which is, solid, I would say. Both of these are solid. Yeah. They're not like, go out and buy it immediately, but they're both solid. But this one is about, two adult women, one of whom is, she's like a DJ, isn't she? She's very much into the nightclub scene.
Yeah, the electronic music kind of scene.
Yep. So she's very hip on the nightclub scene. The other woman is not, but, like, she ends up going to a club, having an incredible first experience, incredible encounter. I think they, like, have some drunk shenanigans, if I remember right.
Yes.
And, you know, she just can't get this woman out of her head. And she can't get, you know, this type of music and this type of vibe out of her head. So she ends up, you know, going back and, like, getting into a relationship with this woman, and they learn more about the club scene together. I know for a fact this creator is on Twitter and is a huge music nerd, really big on, like, the DJ scene and electronic music scene. So, I think you definitely feel that passion within this manga. You know, he definitely seems to know what he's writing about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add about it, because it's just kind of sweet.
Yeah,
it's short,
it's
it's
good.
3 volumes.
Like, it's a good, Yuri about women finding each other, plus also music.
Then the other one is Whisper Me a Love Song, which is, it is a sweet, saccharine, adorable high school Yuri that I think is set in a co-ed school, but it feels like it's set in a girls' school because none of the boys have faces and they never show up as actual characters. So I feel like that gives you a pretty strong vibe for what type of series this is. It's a Eurytopia. Yeah, everyone is just inherently bisexual. Nobody bats an eye. It's just like, you're in love with a girl? Sick. Me too. And this is about a girl who, at like the cultural festival or something, sees a band on stage, one of the bands from the Light Music Club, which is the same club that K-On! Is about, and is just absolutely smitten with the vocalist's voice. She loves her. She declares she's fallen in love on the spot. And she ends up running into this singer on the roof the next day, I think, just singing to herself, playing the guitar to herself. And she's like, professes her love, you know, oh my gosh, it was love at first sight. And the singer, who's more of like a cool, like, butch girl, which I do like. Yuri is so often femme, so I think both this and After Hours have more of a butch femme dynamic, which is, you know, if you're into that, this one has it. But, yeah, she hears this profession of love, and she's all, Doki! And, she's like, I've fallen in love at first sight, too, with you! And I'm going to make you fall in love with me. But, unfortunately, their definitions of what they meant by I've fallen in love at first sight are different. Because the femme girl is like, oh my gosh, I'm your biggest fan. And the butch girl is like, big gay. Oh no, whatever shall we do? And that misunderstanding goes on way too long, because they're high schoolers and they're dumb, so.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of the summary of every high school Yuri? They're high schoolers and they're dumb, so it takes forever.
Yeah.
Not everyone. That's a generalized statement, but a vast majority.
Yeah. This is, I would say, much more inherently about stupid misunderstandings as a function of the plot than other Yuri. But that is definitely something that shows up as a core plot point in most high school Yuri, yes.
Yeah.
But in this one, it just is the plot, so. Which G is allergic to, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend this series to G.
It just kind of annoys me. And it, like, in anything, gay, het, whatever. I'm just, kids, talk to each other, please. For once, just communicate.
For what it's worth, I was also annoyed by this, but I think the singer girl is cute, so I'm still reading it.
That's good.
The art's cute, too. It's very cute Yuri art. So, I mean, if you like high school Yuri, there you go. Here's another one. It's not really, there's not a lot of music in it, to be honest. Like, for having a guitar on the front cover, you would think it's much more about music than it is, but it's not really. Yeah, not really.
No, that's a shame.
But it exists. After Hours is definitely about music, so.
Yeah, that one is more so. It's about music. It's also about like growing up a lot, or like I don't know, reaching adulthood, coming to terms
finding
with
yourself.
responsibility.
Yeah, another, I guess, high-profile recent release, of an older manga. This is like switching gears completely from Mr. Whisper Me a Love Song. Because this is the most boomer dad manga I've ever read in my life. Let's talk about Blue Giant.
Alrighty. Yeah, that's a pretty good
Hey,
summary
G,
of it. Yes.
If you want to get by in this world, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Oh my god.
Get yourself a little part-time job at the local mechanic shop. You know, by talking to the guy once, being like, hey, could you use some help? Oh, yeah, we would love some help. And then you just work there for the rest of high school.
Yeah, you know my dad, right? Yes, boy, I do. Here you go. I will employ you. But then, of course, it's like, Dad, I have a dream. I don't want to work as a mechanic for my whole life. I have a dream I'm following, and that is to make no money as a jazz musician.
I'm gonna be the greatest jazz musician in the world. And his dad's just like, go for it, son.
Go for it.
And every time someone's like,
already...
what the hell even is a jazz musician? Like, how are you gonna make money doing that? He's just like, repeats, I'm gonna be the greatest jazz musician in the world until they start to believe him. Yeah. Which is a power move, I've gotta say. I just imagine, like, you know, like Drew Gooden and Danny Gonzalez, like the commentary YouTubers, they do that as a joke a lot, where they just repeat the same line with increasing intensity, and I imagine that that's what he's doing. I'm gonna be the greatest jazz musician in the world. I'm gonna be the greatest jazz musician in the world. I'm gonna be the greatest jazz musician in the world.
And lo and behold, despite just due to his sheer passion and energy,
his sheer fucking gumption.
He might not have the skills, but god damn it, he's got the attitude. He can go far in this life. And at least at one point he does start to actually have lessons.
Take lessons? Yeah.
For this
the
instrument
whole time.
that
like, he won't even, like, let anyone listen to him. So I'm just, like, imagining him, like, me when I first started the viola, just, like, holed up alone in my room. Like, yeah, this is going great. That is truly the sign of a great artist, is when you refuse to take lessons and refuse to let anyone listen to how you sound.
Yeah, and then once he does, that old man is like, "You're shit, kid. You literally all you have is volume. Do you even know how to play this?" And then he's like, "One day I will convince that old man that I am a genius, that I am going to be the greatest saxophone player of all time." And I'm like,
am I supposed to like this asshole? Wow, he's so pretentious.
It's one of those things where it's like, this kid, I don't think he's inherently, like, a bad kid. Like, he's not a bad person, but also he's just so naive to anything.
You know what
happening.
He is? He's not a bad kid, but you know what he is? He is so annoying.
Yeah, he's a pain in the ass.
But everyone's like, wow, you're so cool. You're the coolest person I've ever met.
Oh my gosh, you're so good. He even plays his saxophone when it's super hot in the summer and super freezing in the winter.
Yeah,
and for some reason the translator
won't destroy his instrument.
His instrument. For some reason, the translator kept making him say it's brick out, and I did not understand what that meant because that's apparently a very regional New York term. I'm like, this kid does not live in New York.
I was so confused by what time period this was supposed to be, because I was imagining there's probably some sort of dialect going on in the Japanese, and I would have to read it in Japanese to check. But there's, a really... It feels like when they're trying to make, like, some boomer movie sound folksy, is how this translation comes across. But it mixes eras so much, because it'll be like, it uses mofo at one point, but then, like, a few pages later, it uses lit, and I'm like, wait a minute, what year is this?
and, like, okay, I don't think that... You can translate dialects however you want, but also, as someone whose first language is English, I had absolutely no idea what it meant when he was like, it's brick out. Contextually, I was like, oh, he's probably saying it's fucking cold, but like, that is not... I have never heard that term in my entire life, and when I posted my confusion about it on Twitter... a lot of people were like, yes, I have no idea what this means. And I think that's just maybe not a good decision to make. Also, it just didn't make sense for this, like, kid in, like, Japan to know that. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah,
what?
I just feel like if you're gonna pick a region for one. Mm-hmm. And pick a time period, Jesus. Mm-hmm. But also, like, picking some area of New York is a weird choice for Sendai.
Like, yeah. Well, and I
feel
like
he should be from, like, Fargo or something. Like, Minneapolis
but I was like, maybe it's because he's super into jazz. But also, like, that's such a weird thing to have picked up. It's just strange. It was just strange.
He's a strange child, so...
I mean, true. This is
the way that the girls just, like, fawn over how manly his, like, gumption is, like, so... it's so boomer. It's so boomer. Everything about this is so, like, your dad manga.
And unfortunately, like, and it's exacerbated obviously because it is about jazz. Jazz is not something that a huge amount of, like, young people are into, I would argue, which is kind of a shame because jazz is really an interesting genre of music, and I do think there's a lot that people would enjoy if they gave it a chance. Young people would enjoy if they gave it a chance.
I would love to read a really good jazz manga that was not written by, like, an old man trying to write teenagers who just really have all of the same fucking hobbies as him. Like, this was written by a much older man.
Which is why I would like Kids on the Slope licensed in English one day, please, because that one has at least a lot more realistic teenagers, and is actually set in the 50s, so it makes a bit more sense that they're super into jazz.
It has a set time period.
Yes.
Determined, not vague.
A set time period, plus these teens handle, like, actual teen issues of the 1950s very well. Plus, the music is also, similarly to Given, kind of a way for them to explore and express themselves. And I think that element, having watched the anime, not read the manga, it translates a little bit better. But one of the other things I wanted to say in regards to Blue Giant is that, as you said, this is definitely like a boomer dad manga, because yes, a lot of people familiar with jazz are going to be older. A lot of people who, well, this sort of writing appeals to are going to be emblematic of like how they were raised, and back in my day, this is how things were done, and blah, blah, blah. But also, I think it's quite hard. I mean, we get a question about this that we'll talk about a little bit later, but obviously manga is an illustrated comic with no audio attached to it, right? So it's up to the reader to imagine or envision how music performances sound. And there's typically indication in the comic of like whether they're doing really good or doing really badly or whatever. But I think a lot, like for teenagers in Japan or teenagers or people in their 20s in the Western world or in English-speaking countries, they're not all, like, immediately going to know how a lot of this music sounds in Blue Giant, which I think is another, like, stumbling block for it, just because jazz is not popular, right? Like, jazz is vastly not popular compared to rock and roll, compared to high or pop music, even compared to like classical music. People know and can imagine like a classical piano performance. They don't know what
can
jazz
relate to
sounds
it because
like.
A lot of students are, have experience with classical music, through being band kids and the like. But
exactly,
jazz has like I feel like I wanted to see more of, like, what do the jazz bars and stuff feel like, whereas it's more this image of, like, this one kid who's really weird, just, like, playing saxophone under a bridge like a weird troll.
And also, like, none of his friends know jazz. The only other people who know jazz is, like, his teacher.
He doesn't recommend them songs or performances. He's just like, Coltrane, man, you get me? Coltrane. It's like, okay, but where do I start? Like, especially with jazz, you must have, like, favorite performances. Like, you have so many CDs. Why do you not lend people your CDs if you want them to listen to them?
No,
why won't you tell me your favorite songs?
It's all of jazz. Every jazz. All of
every jazz. I just like every jazz. Every single jazz. I feel like with that, the positive I want to say about Blue Giant is that I did like the art a lot.
No,
it reminds me of Urasawa a lot.
I wanted to add in so far as like how music or performance is depicted on the page and the effectiveness. I do think that Blue Giant reflects that kind of overwhelming sound, or like how when he is playing music in a club setting or to somebody, you do get a good feeling of like the volume, the impact of that performance. So I do think that's conveyed very well in Blue Giant.
See, I was gonna say, like, I was taking so many, like, screenshots. I read this digitally. Screenshots of, like, layouts and stuff that I thought were really cool, because I do think that, like, the way that this artist draws the saxophone playing is really dynamic and fun to look at. But also, I struggled the entire time because he seems to draw each performance the same way. So I didn't have a sense for how this character is improving. Because it's like you would have one guy who's like, that was the worst jazz I've ever heard in my life. Please take lessons. And then you would have another guy in the corner crying because it was so beautiful. And I was like, wait, what? I mean,
No,
the pictures were really the pictures were really cool. So like, I thought he was playing well.
Right.
But now I don't know.
What you didn't understand is that he was crying because his eardrums burst. He was actually in incredible pain, and
see, I don't know. I don't know. The whole time I was like, I can't tell if he's good at playing the saxophone or bad at it. Like, you know.
Well, ultimately, you have to assume that he's just going to be the best because every character and all the flash forwards tell us that he's just the greatest jazz saxophone player in the world.
Oh, so... man. The first time I laid eyes on him, I knew there was something special about this kid. I knew he was going to go far.
Start him, boy, start him. You're like,
You're destined for the stars, kid. You're gonna go places.
Yeah.
I feel like I have never experienced such a just undiluted, pure essence of Boomer Dad as I did when I was reading this manga. It really is incredible. I bet my dad would like it.
Yeah, I don't know if mine would, but it's a curious one. It's sort of unsurprising that it was licensed considering how popular and like noteworthy it is in Japan. Because it's won a bunch of awards, right?
Yeah, and when I went to the International Manga Museum, they were having like a exhibit on the history of the magazine it ran in, and this was one that they had like a special room just for this manga, so which was cool.
And I mean they had a lot of obviously popular over there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of boomer dads who read manga over here, so...
This is true. But I wanted to make note that, like, so this is being released by Seven Seas in English. It's being released in Toon Omnibus editions, but the series also has 2 sequels, Blue Giant Supreme, and then, I think Blue Giant Forever or something. I think that's the sequel after that. I don't really remember what it's called. So it's an ongoing kind of manga. And I will say that I wish that there was more manga about the saxophone, because it's a very cool instrument. And especially, like, saxophone jazz is hell sexy, guys. Like, it's awesome. But I just wish it was a little less boomery, because there's a lot of potential.
Jazz is cool.
It is really cool.
I felt so uncool reading this manga. That's a shame. Which sucks. And again, the saxophone's awesome. Wish there was just more love for brass instruments in general, reed instruments in general. Those aren't typically the ones you see getting a lot of coverage, because they're the less popular sorts of instruments, I think, just generally amongst kids or people. They're typically a bit harder to play, so fewer musicians. But yeah, I mean, if you're super into the saxophone, you may enjoy this series a lot. Although you may get really upset at how poorly he treats his saxophone, because he does not look after that triggering, poor instrument. And it's such an expensive saxophone too, we find out.
It is.
It's like, what? Have some love for your brother. He saved up for that for 3 years.
I know.
He was paying it off. Taking it out in a fucking blizzard or whatever. Jesus.
In the middle of like a 48-degree day with 100% humidity. Mate, that's not how you treat... That's how you treat things.
God. But gee, his gumption.
He's just got that. He's just got that pizzazz.
Anyway, so that series exists. Another, I guess, series that is very acclaimed in Japan, very long running in Japan, that we've only recently, I think because of the anime adaptation, started getting here. I think digital. I'm gonna ask you to clarify after, but this is Forest of Piano. Is that digital only?
Digital only. Yeah.
Okay, I was right. Yes. Yeah, Forest of Piano. I have read the first omnibus volume for this, but it's a weird one. It's
I was gonna say it's one of those series about like talent versus hard work that when it comes to, and again that the idea of like a idiot savant musical genius. It's about two boys, one who is kind of a classically trained pianist, and one of his classmates who is comes from a pretty bad upbringing. I think his mother's a sex worker, and so a lot of his time is spent in the forest behind the apartment building where there's an old abandoned piano, which he just, plays around with. And because of that, he's kind of self-trained outside of normal, musical instruction. And once he is discovered by someone with a little more know-how, is recognized as this, musical genius, and things go from there. Not only does this have, I think, 2 seasons of anime on Netflix, it also has a earlier anime adaptation film from several years before. So it's obviously one that has, to be adapted twice is no small feat. So it's definitely one that has its fans.
This is another one that's won a lot of awards and stuff. So I liked the first volume. I know this one's quite polarizing, I think. There's a lot of people who really hate it, at least through the anime adaptation. I'm not sure why yet. I guess. I feel like I was enjoying myself reading the first volume just a little bit ago, because the shithead bully kid at the beginning, I have known that kid 10 times over at my schools. And it is such a perfect portrayal of that child, specifically. So, I liked the sort of, weird chemistry starting to develop between the protagonists. I liked that they didn't seem to be demonizing the one kid's mom, or, him, for coming from, the red light district. The mom is portrayed positively, at least right now. I think that the art is nice. The art of, especially the forest, when they go into the forest and the piano there.
Beautifully.
It's very pretty, very evocative.
Put together.
It's a very strong image, just a lone kid, playing a piano in the middle of this dense forest. So you're working with some strong imagery there, I think. But I'm looking forward to reading more.
And it's nice that we've, Kodansha put out all of it. I think all 26 volumes in 12 or 13 2-in-1 digital releases. I will say, a lot of because it is ostensibly part of that kind of conflict between traditional traditional learning and then like this, so the hard work and training under kind of established rigorous rules versus the kind of innate genius talent, and the adaptation from there and the potential for, future growth. Conflict is done really well in a similar way to, like, it reminds me a little bit of Honey and Clover, of how there's no real correct way to approach art, and there's, just because you're a genius at something, you're not inherently going to be better, or just because you've been taught something the correct way doesn't mean you're going to be inherently better than someone who comes from it from a different perspective. But also, just because you have like huge innate talent doesn't mean that you're not going to be like overcome or overtaken by people who put in the hard work and dedication and practice. And I think that that kind of juxtaposition is something that's quite well done throughout this particular series. As well as, again, sort of the larger character drama throughout the course of it. It is a long series. I haven't read all of it, so I cannot attest to the ending. But it is one that's very focused on the characters' personalities, and then, of course, again, how they express said personalities through their music. It's a good one. I enjoyed it.
Yep, I'm looking forward to reading more.
In a similar vein of kind of idiot savant, we also have the very popular Nartomei Cantabile, or Cantabile, which has again been released in its entirety digitally from Kodansha. Del Rey put out 15 volumes in print once upon a time, but obviously you can now complete the series reading it digitally, which follows a conductor, so an orchestral conductor who has a lot of personal issues. He's going through he's going through some stuff. Namely, he has a real issue with flying and travel, which has really stunted his career opportunities.
Yeah, he is so arrogant for someone who will not leave the country.
Yes. So he's an asshole, but I can't quite remember, but he's he's a student at a music school. Student?
Yep.
I think he's a student at this music school.
You would be forgiven for thinking that he's, a terrible just teacher, because that's sure the attitude he carries in his life.
Exactly. But, we have the whole motley crew of various musicians, some more of an oddity than others, but then we have the titular Nartomei, who I don't know how she lives, because her life, she just doesn't seem to know how to function.
She just is the bitch you live like this meme.
Exactly. But is a incredibly talented pianist. She's hugely fantastic at playing piano and just general music stuff. But yeah, she just doesn't, she can barely dress herself. She lives just in trash. And so our protagonist, he is not only enthralled and amazed and has just completely captivated by her music, but also he's just in shock and horror that she lives like this. And so he is kind of put on care duty for her, makes sure that she gets dressed half the day. And it's sort of their romance. They've got friends and stuff going on as well. It's been a while since I've watched Nartomei. And although I do have the first season on DVD, because that was released here. Not in the US, but it was released here. And it's been a long time since I read any of the manga. But yeah, basically it's their romance and him getting over his weird trauma of flying and her kind of becoming more of a functional person and gaining independence outside of their friendship relationship. And obviously a classical music focus. So,
yep. This is a big, band geek manga. It's so popular, and that is reflected in the number of adaptations it's had as an anime, as a J-drama, as a K-drama. There is so much Nartomei Cantabile in the world.
Yes.
And almost none of it in English, so at least we have the manga. And apparently, if you live in Australia, the first season of the anime.
Well, I don't know if you can get it anymore. You used to be able to get it 5 years ago, but it is very out of print. It does exist. You might have better luck chasing down the Taiwanese DVD sets, which also have English subtitles, and the dub that was produced in LA.
There you go.
I think namely the reason it never got a US release was because of music rights, which has just continued to be an issue for a lot of series. Notably Evangelion, with Fly Me to the Moon. It's not an issue that's gotten any better over the last 10 years. It'll only get worse.
Yay.
Corporate copyright. Yay.
This was another one that I just read the first volume so that I would know the premise for this podcast. So, I liked the first volume. More than I thought I would, to be honest, because I knew that the guy was, a major asshole. But I do think he's a funny asshole, so...
and the series does, acknowledge that he's an asshole. The series knows he's an asshole. Yep. It's not just
He's...
Oh, yes.
He's
I'm...
Because he's a genius, it's okay for him to be an asshole. It's he's a genius and a fucking asshole. And honestly, his being an asshole is, the biggest thing holding him back from the world right now. And his fear of flying. But it's, both of those things. He gets, dropped from, the good, piano class because he's just such a fucking asshole. He gets in a fight with the teacher, and the teacher's
yep.
No, not having it. Where the hell do you get off? But yeah, I feel like he's an asshole that I know. And I find him funny. And I find Nartomei funny, also.
Yeah,
incredible. Nartomei's just shamelessness also is very funny. So the way that she just is always in the background of her friends' shots stealing their food is incredibly good. The gremlin energy is powerful. So that's another one that I'll look forward to reading more of. For just obligatory reasons, because I want all of you to write it into the next 7 Seas survey and every survey afterwards until it happens. Shonen Note is so good. It's an 8-volume series by Yuki Kamitani, the creator of Our Dreams at Dusk, of Nabari no O. And it is about a middle school choir club. This is another sort of, I guess, idiot savant type of series where you have the main character, Yuta-kun, who has this incredibly beautiful soprano singing voice. but has never, like, done anything with it. So he's very excited when he gets into middle school to join the choir club. He's very, like, he doesn't want to sing solo. He wants to sing in an ensemble. He wants to be in the choir club. And that's kind of where we start from. And, you know, it's sort of him recognizing that he's someone with talent. Him recognizing that why he loves singing, why he wants to sing, and in what capacity he wants to sing. He gets involved with his community's opera theater. And so we have sort of the intermingling of that opera side of things and the people he interacts with there, and the choir club, which is the main focus. We get to know a lot of the other choir club kids, who all have various, you know, things they need to work on and various hang-ups. You know, we're watching them sort of grow as people in this very transient time. Shonen Notes subtitle is Days of Evanescence, so it's very focused on, you know, this moment of early adolescence and puberty as this fleeting thing that... And really trying to capture the preciousness of that moment, I guess. Before these kids go their separate ways in high school. We do have the sort of rivalry between, like, Yutaka, and it's kind of a one-sided rivalry because Yutaka is such a sweet little bean who does not understand conflict at all. And then there's this Russian kid who's a world-famous, like, boy soprano singer, who is, of course, you know, classically trained, takes great pride in the fact that he provides for his family, even though he's only, like, 12. His name is Vladimir, and he just is Yurio from Yuri on Ice. And, yeah, he's so cute. And, like, these two boys' rivalry with each other is so cute, how they admire each other, but of course Vladimir has to be all tsundere about it. But, like, keeps flying into Japan just to see Yutaka is precious. Because he's rich. And he likes to flaunt it. But, of course, there's also, you know, the drama that comes from Yutaka and Vladimir as well. Being very afraid of puberty because they have this beautiful soprano singing voice that they know is going to disappear. And it ends up being contrasted. Yeah.
We no longer have castrati, so that's not an option. You don't want it to be an option.
Oh my god. I don't want that to be an option. Please do not touch my precious little beans. They're so cute. And no. Yeah, so they
sorry, don't mean to derail.
Yeah. They and I do like how, like, this very, like, cisgender focus, because obviously they're both, like, cisgender boys, so is sort of undercut by the inclusion of a couple different non-binary characters, as is, you know, Yuki Kamatani's want. Specifically, there is a person in the choir club who, quite the opposite, really wants their voice to change and is experiencing a lot of issues relating to the knowledge that that's not going to happen. Obviously without some sort of, gender-affirming care, etc., hormone therapy, etc. Which the series doesn't go into that, because The characters are 12, but and this is Japan, so but yeah, it's so good. The way that the series portrays music is just, I mean, if you've read any of Kamatani's series, I'm sure you can imagine just the surreal emotional beauty that they are able to convey with. It's one of the only music series I read where I feel like I really can hear the music. I ended up, like, looking up a lot of... Because this one does actually tell you what songs they're singing. Blue Giant. And talks about specific performances, so it's very easy to just go onto YouTube, plug in the song, and listen to it, which is so nice. It's a lot of, obviously, like, middle and high school Japanese choir staples, as well as, you know, you get the opera stuff as well. And it's so good. And please request it from any surveys that happen, specifically the Seven Seas one, every month. Just like I do.
Just like I do.
Come on, it's only 8 volumes.
Tradition. I know.
Monthly
they could
tradition.
absolutely put it out in 2-in-1s as well, so it would only be 4.
And the covers are so beautiful.
It's Kamatani. People already like Our Dreams at Dusk. Everyone I know who's read Nobari no O likes that one. You could... Seven Seas, you could have this. You already put out the Boomer manga. You could have this.
Yeah. Why do we need the Boomer manga over this? Okay? We need both. Music manga for all tastes.
Oh, for all tastes. Give us choir kids some validation, damn it.
God damn it. Seriously. Like, come on. Like, I was so happy to finally read, like, a singing manga. Because I can't play instruments for shit, but I love singing. And then, there is another series that has quite a good anime adaptation that I did want to talk about, even though I personally have a lot of issues with it. Because the art is beautiful, and I actually like how this series portrays music scenes a lot, both in the manga and in the anime. This anime also has one of the best Goose House songs as one of its opening themes. So,
this is true.
And I think it's one that a lot of people think of when they think music manga, music anime, because it is much beloved by a lot of people. And that is Your Lie in April. Yeah, this is another, like, specifically this is one where you've got, like, the boy who's lost his passion for manga. Music.
That one too.
Wow.
Music and manga. He's lost his passion
manga.
for life, to be honest.
He's lost his passion for life because he's being horribly abused by his mother. Well, his mother died, right?
No,
or something.
she's just really abusive. She's
just
like
mean.
very ill. She's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
We don't really know what's wrong with her, but she sure does get that slapping hand in action.
She's got Victorian wasting disease.
Yes.
No, she's not the one with Victorian wasting disease. Okay.
No.
There is plenty of that in this manga, though, I assure you.
Mysterious pale face disease.
Yeah. The one where you just have a single pretty cough. Oh no. This spells the end.
She stood in the rain for too long and now she must die. Such is life.
Yeah. Well, she succeeded in giving this boy his reason to live back. So we don't need her anymore.
Arguably. Yeah.
So, yeah, so we've got this boy who plays the piano, and hates his life because he's being horribly abused by his mother. I found some of the stuff that he's going through affecting, but I found other aspects of it weird. But certainly, like, if this is reflective of your own experiences, I don't want to invalidate that at all. I know people who were very moved by this series, and, you know, I think that has meaning and worth. So, don't take us dunking on it as, like, us dunking on you. Like, I think it's great that the series means so much to a lot of people.
But on that note, I do think that a lot of people like it or find it, like, amazing because it's just tragedy porn. I think there's a lot of reasons, valid reasons, to connect to these characters, to connect to their personal struggles or their, like, things that have happened to them. But also, because this has a tragic ending, I think, in a similar way to Clannad, I think people just then think it must be the greatest thing that's ever been made because it's sad.
Yeah. The number of times that I see it on people's shelves and they're like, oh man, this was so sad. I'm like...
Sad.
Yeah.
I cried forever. I cried forever, man. This is the saddest thing I ever seen. And I'm not saying it's not sad. People dying are sad. People dying as a teenager, sad. Tragedy, yes. But also, this is melodrama tragedy just to make you sad.
Well, also, my biggest issue with this, and I just wanted to get that disclaimer out of the way, that, like, if this means something to you, if any art means something to you, don't let people take that from you. Out of the way, this is about a male character who's lost all of his passion for life, and specifically his passion for his art, his music, his piano, who finds it again thanks to a somewhat odd but bright, spunky girl who plays the violin, named Kaori, I believe her name is.
Yep.
And he meets her in the park playing the melodica, which is a very childlike instrument. They teach it to kids in school along with the recorder here. On top of the jungle gym, playing with the little kids because she's such a child at heart. What a young,
so quirky,
pure soul.
So alive.
She's so quirky, so alive. And she is here to give this boy meaning in his life.
To teach him the joys of existing. And how
she doesn't... Yeah, she's, I couldn't tell you much about Kaori as a person other than how she feels about the main character and the fact that she's got some unspecified disease.
She just really wants to play the violin. She just wants to play the violin and wants someone to play accompaniment to her violin before she dies a tragically early death. And you're like, alright.
Yep. Yeah, it's honestly, and people will argue with you about this, which is baffling to me, but she is the most textbook example of a manic pixie dream girl and why they're an issue. Ever. Like, it's so textbook. It's so basic and obvious to me why this is an issue. Because I am honestly someone who will come to the defense of a lot of characters that people call manic pixie dream girls. But not this one.
No.
She has no purpose beyond making you feel sad because she died, and making the main male character, like, get his shit in gear. Feel like life has meaning again.
appreciate that the life that he has and the things that he can do, and he will always remember her and keep her in his heart, and probably never get over it.
You could replace her with, like, a CD that plays violin and a magic 8-ball that has a bunch of encouraging words on it, and you would have exactly the same story.
Oh my, no, Ray, then you wouldn't have the weird romantic, triangle rivalry.
That thing.
Between
we've got the childhood friend also. Yeah,
who also, like, gets none of her own story except for her to be jealous of the other girl.
Yeah.
And then the fourth character, the other boy, who I don't even think, like, ever gets anything, like, any of his own stuff to do. And he just exists to feel jealous that the childhood friend girl likes the piano boy and is and oh my god. I know they're all 15 or whatever, but oh my god. Kids. They all serve no purpose aside to, like, I don't know, kind of interact between performances.
I will say, it's pretty. The anime is pretty.
It is
in particular.
The music performances,
nice.
the actual music in the anime is good too. Like, it's a beautiful looking, beautiful sounding piece.
Yeah. Also, check out that Goose House song. It's really good. It's called Hikaru Nara, and it's one of my favorites by them. So they're back together, which is nice.
Yay!
Sans one member, but they were always switching members all the time anyway. So. Yeah. So that's your lie in April. Was there any other series that you wanted to talk about?
Nothing in particular. I think, if anyone has been following Ray's Twitter recently...
Yeah. I guess we better talk about those Snow White notes. Which I will be trying again with in Japanese. Kodansha. Yep. So, this... it's such a shame, because I have a feeling I'm going to like it when I read it in Japanese. But I couldn't... There was nothing for me to like, because I couldn't even tell what was happening. This series is about the shamisen, specifically the Tsugaru shamisen, which is such a cool subject for a manga. It's by Marimo Ragawa, who does The Vampire and His Pleasant Companions, Baby and Me, and New York, New York, which will be coming out, I don't know, next year or something.
End of this year or something, yeah.
End of this year. I don't remember. But I'm very excited about that one as well. That one's good. I recommend it. There are some potential content warnings on that one that I think you should be aware of before you pick up New York, New York. But I don't know. If you want to know about that, send me a message or whatever. So I was all super excited because I like the creator, I like the subject. This translation... Recent
popular anime. For that
recent
one as
popular anime. This translation... I can't tell if it was done by a machine and then corrected by a person in a very rushed manner, or if it was just done by a very inexperienced, very underpaid, very rushed person. But this translation was done by Ami Maru, which a few different companies have recently come under fire for using Futekiya / Manga Planet in particular, but also Kodansha for their digital titles. This company, basically, they released a statement in response to accusations that they were paying, essentially, like a flat rate of, $300 for a 288-page manga, which the person was given only a week to complete. And they gave a response to that basically said, well, yeah, but, so,
yeah, so, like, that's,
so, what are you gonna do about it? Yep. So, just know that this utterly trash, unreadable, worse than a bad scanlation, localization, translation, was probably created by someone being taken advantage of and highly miserable for the week they were given to translate this. So,
I also, before we move into, like, the actual series itself, I wanted to flag this, that obviously this is, the whole situation is a effect of so much manga being licensed and released all of the time, over the last 5 years. Just the sheer amount of content being pumped out by all of the publishers. And digital, I think, is definitely kind of flies under the radar. It's not as inherently popular as print manga tends to be. Obviously, a lot less scrutiny put towards digital titles, which is why you are seeing this sort of scandal coming out of Kodansha digital titles and Furukiya, Manga Planet. In saying that, I want to reiterate and encourage people to remember that does not mean that you should not support digital in a blanket way. It means that we need, as fans, to hold publishers accountable for how they treat their staff or what they pay their staff on digital releases to the same standards as they do for their print releases. The solution to this is not, okay, well, then it's good and it's fine that it's better for me to pirate said content. The solution is calling out these bad practices and demanding better from Kodansha, from Furukiya, from whomever else, and demanding pay increases.
I would recommend also not picking up the titles that you know are going to have this issue. I certainly wouldn't blame you for boycotting companies that use these companies outright. I think that is one method of praxis that you could reasonably employ. Don't turn to piracy for the series that they put out. Just, resolve yourself that, you're not going to read them for the time being. But certainly the ones that have this type of translation, just don't pick them up because, I'm saying this as someone who read it, don't pick them up because they are not a product worth your money. At all. The fact that someone was exploited to make this just makes it even worse, but it's not readable. It would be less confusing to just have have it in a language that you can't read, Japanese or Chinese or whatever, and have it in front of you. It would make more sense than the English translation.
Anyway.
Yeah. So, questions. So we can end on a more positive note than that. We did have a couple that were just, pointing out titles.
Because I did ask people for their favorites. I don't know if there was any explicitly favorites, but lots of titles mentioned.
Yeah, so I figure I'll just go through those. First we have from @SaintAuli. Asking us if either of us are familiar with La Corda de Oro. So they really enjoyed both the anime and manga of the original game, which came out in the late 2000s. Um, I don't think G is familiar. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar, like, you know what it is, but I
am
have seen the
aware
anime
of it.
and read the manga.
I am aware of it existing. I know that Sentai put out DVDs of like one of the spin-offs, Blue Sky or something.
Yep.
I have never seen any of it. I have never
Yeah.
seen or read any of it. A little bit outside of my interests.
I have, and it's fine. I don't like the purple boy. He's kind of a yandere, which was weird. But, yeah, I like it. I like the trumpet boy, and I like the cello boy. They're my favorites. That's my opinions. We have, Eric Henwood Greer coming to us, as he often does, with a excellent list of various classics, specifically year 24, and 60s, 70s, shoujo music manga, so I can just go through those. I have not, unfortunately, read any of them yet. But there are some quite famous ones here. Henso Kyoku, or Variation by Keiko Takemiya, it looks like. Nordiska Sonata, also by Takemiya. Orpheus no Mado, this one's very famous, from Ryoko Ikeda. I know it has a Takarazuka adaptation that I need to watch, so... and then Fire by Hideko Mizuno, which, yeah, that one's definitely always mentioned in lists of good music manga, but it is one that I have not gotten to yet. And then we also had, at 365 Days of 801, said I See Given, but my question is, did you watch the anime first or read the manga first of Gravitation? Because that's the original Gay Boys in a Band manga. And I do not think this is the original Gay Boys in a Band manga, because there's tons of glam rock manga that came out in June magazine in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And, yep. But, Gravitation, yeah. I think you could probably call it the original Gay Boys in a Band anime, more than likely. Certainly the first one that people in the West often experience. I literally, have never read or watched Gravitation, and also don't have much interest in doing so.
Shall I tell my story of my experience with Gravitation? Because it is fractionally more than yours. Wherein, in saying that, I have not read or watched Gravitation either. My only exposure to Gravitation, outside of people, now knowing that people started with it, it was a lot of people's first BL or yaoi, whichever you want to call it, was I had a DVD copy, Australian DVD copy, of a not very good movie called Origin Spirits of the Past, and one of the trailers on that DVD was for, I don't know whether it was for the show or the OVA of Gravitation. It was for something, Gravitation. And I watched, because back in the day, that's when trailers were like special features on things, like upcoming releases. And I used to watch those all the time. And it was one of those weird, like, ADV Sentai trailers where it's just the opening song with, like, clips cut into it. And so I watched that, and I was very confused because I could not tell whether or not the main character, the kid with the pink hair, was a boy or a girl the entire time, and none of the clips helped me figure that out. So I didn't know whether it was just like a very boyish looking girl or androgynous looking girl with the pink hair, or if it was gay or what. I was very young into my anime days, so I wasn't aware of BL, and so I watched it like 5 times trying to figure it out, and I that day I left confused, and it wasn't until much later that I figured it out. So, I haven't watched or read it, and again, similarly to Ray, I don't really plan to, just because I am now older and wiser and have exposure to many other very good BL manga and anime, and I think Gravitation's very emblematic of the era that it came from, and not inherently
from everything I've heard, yeah.
Watching. Yeah.
I feel like I've heard some of the songs, and everyone likes the songs, but I was like, so.
I probably wasn't even paying attention to the songs, because I was just trying to figure out whether that kid was a boy or not. I was like, what is going on here? Who are these people?
What is happening? And then last, we just have 2 sets of questions that are actual questions. From @WhimsyDearest, we have, what unique challenges does manga face in portraying music, and which manga does an excellent job at conveying sound? Yeah, it's really difficult, because I feel like I've read stuff that, like, where the instruments look really cool on the page, but it's like, I couldn't hear the music. Even, like, something where I think that, like Blue Giant, where I think that, like, the images of him playing the saxophone are really cool, and the use of speed lines is super dynamic. I didn't feel like I could hear the performance with that one. But, yeah, and then obviously there's stuff like Nana that doesn't even really try. That's just kind of showing you a still of the band looking cool playing their instruments, which I think, you know, is fine as well. Because the music isn't really the focus of that series. But, yeah, for me, it's Shonen Note portrayed music better than any other manga that I've read, honestly. I feel bad saying that because Beck did a really good job as well. Yep. Those are both really good for that. Anything else? Or should we go on to the last question?
I think to that point, even in discussion today, when a manga or when a music manga does have an anime adaptation, that's when it finds its popularity, typically, because obviously there is an audio quality to that. Yeah. Like you do get music performance when you're watching an anime, and from there, that's typically when we start to see a lot of these series not only grow in popularity in Japan, but then make the jump to being licensed in English in other regions, rather than coming over purely on their own merits, in a similar way to Blue Giant having done. And I think we may see that transition change a little bit over, the coming years, but I do think that it's a pretty tried and true reality that if a music manga has an anime and that finds its audience, then it's much more likely that we will get the manga down the line. So yeah. Yeah.
I guess, are there particular anime that you think do really well with adapting the music? I would put Beck.
I'd say Beck.
First of all.
I'd also say one, not that we don't have the manga in English, but Kono Oto Tomare, which is about the koto. I thought that was very good at portraying learning the koto performances, the ins and outs of, I guess, the instrument itself and how it's played, especially for a instrument that isn't as recognizable for a lot of people. Sound Euphonium as well does a great job with its music.
Um, I also like Nana's music a lot. They picked two, like, quite well-known artists that I think match the style of the two singers really well. Olivia Ferreira, who has a very, like, poppy, gorgeous, almost operatic voice, and also is fluent in English. And, what's her name? Anna Tsuchiya? I don't remember. For Nana, who has a very sort of, not necessarily, like, technically perfect sound, but very, like, rough and emotional, which fits how those singers are described within the series, so I felt like they adapted the sounds of those two bands pretty accurately to how I imagined them when I was reading the series. Oh, yeah, I wanted to say, those Snow White notes.
Notes, yeah.
That manga, I did like the portrayal of the shamisen in that one. Just, like, I don't know, I guess just because I've heard Tsugaru shamisen before, so I definitely, like, appreciated that I got, like, the feeling of, like, expecting to hear the shamisen and then hearing the Tsugaru shamisen and being like, oh, shit!
And although I haven't watched it, I've heard nothing but, like, pretty solid things about the anime as well, so I think that probably adapted the music aspect of that really well.
And then the last question we have is from @BacchusVines. I've noticed that most music manga tend to be focused on string instruments. I would add piano to that.
Well, technically, piano is a string instrument.
Shut up! What other instruments do you wish manga would bring into a story? I would like to see, like, a big, huge, real church pipe organ.
Oh, hell
That'd
yeah.
be sick. That'd be so sick.
I honestly think there's a lot of potential. Well, I said before, I would like to see a saxophone manga that's cooler than Blue Giant.
Yeah.
Because saxophone is a hella sexy instrument, guys. It's really super cool. And brass and winds and reed all tend to be kind of overlooked. They're not necessarily as popular comparatively to their stringed counterparts. I think there's also a lot of potential for, like, percussion, especially the drums. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen something more focused on the drums.
Yeah, I know there's, like, taiko manga that exists in Japanese. But that's never getting translated. Never say never,
and that's
I guess.
a little bit outside of what people expect for drums.
Drums. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taiko's sick, though. Well, I would like choir manga Shonen Note by Yuki Kamatani available in English. So, I would like that the instrument of the voice brought into a story. Honestly, I'd like to see that more in general. I would like to see even another series focused on the voice and singing. Not the popular reality competition show, The Voice.
There's too much of that in the world already. We don't need any more of that.
What else? There you go.
When thinking about instruments, I always am reminded, because one of my high school friends, and still very good friend, she plays the trombone, or used to. And all I can ever remember is her telling me that her trombone teacher called trombone the voice of the angels. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. I'm like, that's such a weird instrument to say that about, but it's also a very visually interesting instrument.
Maybe like some bigger string instruments. It's always the violin. I played viola. I'd like to see like a cello manga. Like, I've seen cello.
Double bass. Yeah.
Yes. Cello, characters I've seen, like, there's a cellist in La Corda de Oro, like I mentioned, but, like, main character cello would be cool. I like cello. It's a very beautiful instrument.
It is. Or harp as well. Like, I feel like there's a lot of potential for harp.
Harp manga would be so good. Ooh. Yeah, so, Japanese manga industry, get on it. 7 C's, licensed shonen no. And, yeah.
Everyone else, demand better for the people working on digital manga. They deserve to be paid just as much as everyone else. But I think that's it for music manga. Kind of a easy breezy, not too serious of a discussion. Little bit of a break after our amazing episode last month and our hopefully amazing episode next month. For next month, we have the amazing Lum Ranmayasha joining Ray and I to talk about one of our favorite series, one of their favorite series, Fruits Basket. We are doing a series spotlight, and they have very kindly agreed to join us for that. So, obviously, we will probably be going into spoilers for that series, so if you have not yet finished reading it, or haven't started it, or haven't finished the recent anime, you may want to get on that if you're wanting to listen to the episode in full. But, yeah, super duper excited, and I know Ray is just effervescent at this topic.
Effervescent. Yes, Fruits Basket is my favorite manga of all time, and I'm excited.
It'll be great. It'll be great. So, as always, be sure to leave your questions for that either when I ask for them on Twitter. You can add them to the comments of this episode if you're watching this on YouTube. You can also message either myself at CollectingG on Twitter or at Ray at Whimsical Pics on Twitter if you're not wanting to publicly post a question. And of course, as always, you can listen to the podcast on pretty much every major podcasting platform: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and of course on my YouTube channel. We really appreciate each and every single one of you listening. There's so many of you. I'm always flabbergasted. But yeah. So, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Look after yourselves, stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to each other, and I will see you in the next episode of Read Right to Left. Bye till then.
Bye, guys.